Hey everybody, we're back. What the hell do I know with JB? And I'm so excited because today's conversation, man, I think it's going to be one that's just going to sit with you. You might just have to sit for a second, and I get to talk one-on-one with J.S. Park. He's been on Lisa Ling. He's a hospital chaplain, author, and someone who spent years walking with people through the hardest moments of their lives. His book, As Long as You Need Permission to Grieve, is powerful. It's raw. It gives language to pain a lot of us never know how to name. If you've ever lost someone or something, let's be honest, that's all of us. This one's for you. So let's give a warm jabroni welcome to my friend, J.S. Park.
JB, happy to be here.
Here it is, baby.
What the hell do I know? I'm just JB, middle-aged dad with ADD. Candid combos, jokes so lame, jabronis pulling a poker face. Just a couple of dudes with ADD. What the hell do I know with JB?
Man, I love that. You know, I love the name of your podcast, and I don't know. You know what? I have never talked about this publicly. This is gonna be the first time.
Let's
when
go.
I was a kid, I was actually diagnosed with ADD.
Come on,
That's
really?
when it was still called ADD before ADHD.
Right, right.
Yeah, but yeah, I've never brought it up publicly before. But
How about that? That's like a first right here, man. I really appreciate that. You know what's crazy is I've never really been diagnosed with it, but you know I'm certain I have it. My attention sometimes goes on and on. I feel like a squirrel, like squirrel. There it goes, let me catch it. But I find myself sometimes fixated on things. That's where I think the ADD comes from, where I get so fixated on I have to get it out, or I have to jot it down, or I have to put my notes down, or I have to journal. My wife caught me the other night. It was like 3 a.m, and I was writing an outline for a new book. And it was like I just woke up with that. I had to get it. I had to get it out. Like I had no choice. And I don't know. Does that where your mind you feel like it rolls sometimes?
I have done that very exact thing that you just said.
Yeah.
About 3 a.m. It's
Yeah.
like I got a little thimble and I'm trying to catch a rainstorm outside,
Right.
And it's just that moment of inspiration that comes, and the fixation. You're so right. Sometimes I'll get a thought that comes and it'll just be swirling around and around, and I have to see it through to the end. Or I read a book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks, a very formative book for me about neurological disorders. But there's one chapter, he talks about a gentleman who has something that he called Touretteism.
Oh, well.
Where somebody who had intrusive thoughts would just suddenly have these creative outbursts and just suddenly make up these kind of wild, imaginative narratives. And he got all his energy out playing drums and all this stuff. Then he went on medicine. But when he went on medication, and I myself take medication, and I'm a champion and an advocate for that.
Sure.
But this particular person, when he took it, he said it didn't like what it did to him because it took away that sort of creativity. And what he ended up doing was he took medicine half the week so that he could function at work. And then on the weekends, when he played drums with his band and did the stuff he wanted to do, he went off the meds.
That's amazing. And I
Isn't that
honestly,
awesome?
I honestly understand it. I mean,
Yeah.
and I also am a proponent. If there's medication that can help you focus and it makes you improves your life, I certainly would recommend it as well. If it's medication that makes you feel numb to the world, I mean, look, I get it. There's a balance I think everybody has to feel, and that's sometimes where I think we get it wrong as humans. And I think that's something that when I read your work, I feel like you give space for people to discover. That's the one thing I love about reading this book. And I know we had some technical difficulties, so you're doing so well. June's doing so well. And I know we're going to go through June and JS because we tried to have you remote. I'm actually in Atlanta. People know that I'm from Florida when you watch this show. I'm up here. I'm actually going to officiate a wedding in South Carolina. On my way to South Carolina, I stopped in to see my daughter in Atlanta, who we got a chance to be with her before before we go to the wedding, but I've been trying to schedule this interview with you for quite some time. So when you nailed down a time, I was like, I'm in. We're bringing the equipment. We're going to do it. But I'm holding up your book right now, As Long as You Need, which is your latest copy up. And man, it's so good. If you've, like I said in the intro, if you've grieved before, this book and the title caught me because we've lost some people in our lives. And everybody does. And grief hits you in such a way. I want to talk to you about it because you've walked through people in hospital rooms, loss, life-changing moments. I mean, what was the moment that finally pushed you to write this book, As Long as You Need? And did you find it healing or haunting writing this?
That's a great question, JB. And thank you for asking it. You know, I went through a program, a 6-month internship and a year-long residency. I talk about that in the book too, but chaplains have a pretty intense education.
Right.
And we are tasked with writing reflections and writing what we call verbatims. They changed the name of it, I think, the clinical contact narrative, but basically it's like a book report on a patient visit.
Right.
And we talk about an experience that we had that may have created a disproportionate response. Something in their story touched something in our story. There was an overlap or a connection. And as I was writing these over the course of months, I kept getting this feeling like the discoveries that I'm making, the insight that I'm gaining, the patient stories where I'm just seeing grief upon grief, and some of the things I used to believe about grief, but that changed, felt like it couldn't just stay in this educational program I was taking.
Right.
I felt like I had to share that with people. And sometimes I would share that with family and friends, and they may say something like, I've never heard that before, or I wish I knew that when I was grieving or when I had loss. And so in some way, what I wanted to do and to be was to have this portable chaplain in people's hands, you know?
Yep.
And hopefully when people read the book or when people, you know, talk about, when they talk about the concepts in it, that they feel like, hey, I'm being chaplained right now. I don't know if that's a verb.
No,
but,
I think so.
You know?
Yeah.
And what the chaplain does, and I think you said it just right about making space. You know, I've heard that term a lot, making space, but one of the ways in which I see it tangibly is when you see someone going through something, they will express their grief in a particular language or vocabulary. And sometimes other people, not understanding it, misinterpreting it, or even shaming it, will say, well, I've never heard it like that, or I don't like the way that you're doing it, and will shame it. Well, for example, if somebody is screaming when they get the news that their loved one just died, somebody else might say, hey, you need to calm down, or you need to bring it down.
Yeah.
And in that moment, isn't screaming telling the truth?
Right.
Isn't screaming what that person needs? Who wouldn't scream when they found out that they lost their 5-year-old or they lost their only mother on earth?
Right.
And so I'm constantly trying to expand the vocabulary, the language, build grief literacy, to be able to say these are actually more than appropriate reactions, are human reactions. And if I'm uncomfortable seeing somebody's grief, that says a lot more about me than that person. And so hopefully that's part of what the book does. And that's kind of what I wanted to give to the world. As I was writing these reflections, I thought I got to package these in a way that I can share this with people.
You're an incredible writer. And the title itself, As Long as You Need, really jumped out at me when I found you in Instagram, and then I found you through Amazon and purchased the book, because that title, As Long as You Need, to me just hit, because, you know, it's one thing sometimes when you lose the third cousin twice removed, you know, which terrible for those closer in the knit. Mm-hmm. But we've experienced, you know, when my wife was 35, she was 33. She lost her father, who was 57 years old, 3 days before Christmas, a blood clot to his lung. And then 6 months later, her mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And so by the time she was 35, she was an orphan. And that is just an immense amount. And when I read that title, As Long as You Need, there was a process that she went through to even recover back her relationship with God. I mean,
Yeah.
because you get angry, you have all these emotions, you have all of these feelings, and they were important to me. I was, we were high school sweethearts, so I was 17, she was 15, so they were like second parents to me. But
Mm.
that death in our life was so immense. And what's interesting is when I read your book, there were moments in time that I realized there were things I would like to redo. I would like to not say certain things in moments. I would like to be able to sit in the grief when I wouldn't. Sometimes we feel like we have to fix things. And your book, that's the idea that you don't have to. In fact, you just said it now. What does it say about me that I can't sit in the grief with someone else? What does it say about me that I can't do it? In fact, when someone's grieving, you don't always know what to say, but what shouldn't we say? Is
Mm.
really the question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, JB, first I want to lift up your in-laws, your
Mm,
wife's parents, and just give a moment for them and all the ways that they poured into both of you and in some way continue to live on in both of you.
100%.
Yeah, I think I read in Martha Hickman's Healing After Loss, she says something like, it's not what we would have chosen, but their memory becomes like a warm blanket,
Mm,
a companion closer than skin. And so, those who are gone, they in some way continue to live, and their legacy lives through you. So I want to lift them up and just
oh,
thank them for being both your parents.
yeah,
Um,
that's
yeah,
good.
JB, about wanting to redo things or not say certain things. And I think I say this in the book, but I used to be mortified and infuriated when I would hear those kind of bypassing cliche type statements,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
platitudes that, yeah, just sort of gloss over and overlook somebody's pain. And I would hear those things and I would assign malicious intent to them. I would think, you're
Mm,
just saying that because you feel uncomfortable, you're insulating yourself. And how could you do this to somebody? But over time, and now having been a chaplain for exactly 10 years, what I have found is that grief is a very uncomfortable thing
mm,
because you're staring at mortality, you're at the edge of the abyss, it's coming for us all.
right.
It's a scary thing to think about and to look at and to face. And so I have taken some of that anger, which I still feel sometimes angry about when I hear those statements, but on top of that have added maybe more compassion or grace on top of it, recognizing that sometimes people don't know what to say or feel that the silence is so big or feel that the abyss is so looming that they just say something because they themselves are trying to grab something in that moment that will hold them. They're comforting themselves when they're thinking they're comforting the person who's hurting. And so in rooms, and especially in rooms where there's big families, and when I visit a patient, I never visit a patient alone. It's always their circles, their communities, their
Right.
people,
Right.
and even their ancestral and historical voices that they have, the intergenerational trauma and all of it. I'm visiting a patient with many people, many voices. Sometimes I have to navigate a room where there are, let's say, 10 people all in different places about the loss that just happened.
Right.
They're not going to be synchronous. We call it asynchronous grief. And so you have one person who is actually looks like they're totally fine, dry eyes, and another person who's in the corner on the floor sobbing. And so my goal isn't to judge this person over here who's not crying or judge this other person over here who's completely shut down. But instead, how can I hold compassion in all the different conditions that they're in? So certainly if I hear something that sounds off or is bypassing, I will try to say something kind. I may say something like, "Well, maybe it's okay to say that it's very hard," or yeah, I may even name the emotion. Like if somebody says something like, "Well, don't cry," or they say, "Be strong, be tough," and then I'll say something like, it would be hard for me to be tough through this," or I'd be crying if I
Hmm.
saw something like this,
Right.
just to name that it's okay. And sometimes they see the chaplain badge and they think, "Oh, if the chaplain says it's okay, maybe it's okay,"
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
but now I come from the angle of I want to have more compassion. If somebody says this thing, maybe that's all they were taught. Maybe they didn't
Right.
know. they weren't given the tools, they weren't given the skill set, to the literacy to be able to encompass this grief. And I'm still learning
Right.
how to expand that. And so I come now more from a place of empathy and compassion and trying to understand, okay, there's a reason that they're saying this. This is their initial way of processing. Let's not judge that, but let's give them more skills. Let's give them more language. And I'm going to try to be as compassionate as I can and meet that person exactly in the condition that they're in.
June, I think the fact that you talked about grief literacy is so important, and it's something that I always think as a person of faith, and it's actually one of those things. I talked to somebody the other day about how we all have versions of our faith. If you were born in the South, you have a different version than if you were born in the Northeast. And if you were born in the
Yeah.
Midwest, or if you were born out in the West Coast, or if you were born handling snakes, or if you were born not handling snakes, right? You have all
Right.
these crazy versions of our faith. And sometimes the loudest voices are like the worst voices. And
Yep.
so it gets, I have a really dear friend of mine that owns one of the largest Ford dealerships in all of Atlanta. And it's like a Metro Atlanta Ford dealership. I could tell how the economy was doing because of how many Ford cars he was selling every month. And I would call him up and I'd say, "Hey, Mike," and listen, shout out Allen Vigil Ford. They do a great job. But I would say, "Hey, Mike, how many cars you sell?" And if he sold so many cars, I'd be like, "Okay, the economy's doing well, right?" But he would tell me, he said, if you look at cars, online ads on car dealerships, the ones that have the balloon guys floating and come down here for, we'll sell you a car. He said the loudest
Yeah.
car dealerships are the worst car dealerships. And I think that can be that same way in our faith. The loudest
great.
voices can be our worst voices. And so, but sometimes that's what you're born with, right? And your experiences make you up. And the hardest thing about that is, how do I find space for some of those worst voices? Because as much as when you hear, that's when you're in those rooms and you hear somebody, and you talk about in your book, there is a pastor that comes in and he looks at you waiting for you to say something different, and you
Yeah.
just kind of sit with the space. I mean, how do you find compassion for sometimes the voices that are not right? Because even though in our faith, we're called to love, not just the people that we like, but the people we don't like,
Yeah.
And how do you find that? How do you find that?
Maybe this comes a little easier to me. I think by disposition, I tend to be optimistic. And, my family sort of makes fun of me because there's a Korean word, sunjinhae, which kind of means naive/gullible/ you're a sucker,
Yeah,
And so I'm that guy who at the gas station, if someone comes to me with a big story about, I need this gas money for all this, 9 times out of 10,
Yeah.
it's probably just a story.
Right, right.
But I'm the guy that will just, yeah, here you go.
Here you go.
If
Yep.
I have cash on me, there you go. And I'll trust God and the universe and all of that with how that person's going to spend it.
Sure.
But I do assume best intent, and you know what I also assume? I assume most people who act out or say things that may be inappropriate or don't have a lot of space for other people,
Mhm.
I assume best intent, and I also assume that person may have suffered some sort of trauma
Yeah,
or
yeah.
yeah,
Right on.
some sort of rigidity or an overbearing religiosity in their lives
Mm-hmm.
that has constricted them from being able to express their emotions, to be themselves authentically. They have been told that grief is wrong. They have been fed the lie. They have been deceived into believing that I have to say these things so that we can rush over grief because pain is bad and because we don't ever want to look at what's actually happening. I can't look at
Wow.
reality. So I can even tell you in my own story, I grew up in a very violent and turbulent household. And, I know my parents, being immigrant parents, they did try really hard. And at the same time, they had their own trauma. They had their own stuff that they were passing down that wasn't resolved. They didn't have the resources. And so I found myself in over positivizing. I don't know if that's a word, but I
Yeah.
would bow tie things, I would
Yep.
always try to sitcom end everything.
Yep.
And I did that because I didn't have that bow tie at the end of the night. Sometimes I'd go to sleep while my parents were still screaming at each other, or, I just lived in fear all the time of their violence. And so in that, I was trying to go into rooms and just trying to make everything nice and good ending all the time. Even though being at the hospital, you find out there's not always a good ending. Things don't always wrap up easily. Sometimes pain remains unresolved. Sometimes loss is just loss. And so I had to find out, on one hand, what about my own trauma is stopping me from being able to sit with people's pain. I needed to have a self-awareness about that. And that took years of therapy. That took years of
Sure.
self-awareness. That took years in the chaplain, or the year and a half chaplain program, really digging through, why do I bow tie everything? My chaplain supervisor, my educator, she began to lovingly call it June bow. Whenever whenever I would try to, really nicely
Yeah,
wrap things
right,
up. Yeah,
right, right.
because in our education, we'd sit with other chaplains and we give each other feedback, and we talk
Sure.
about, hey, here's how this visit could have gone better, or what about if we try this and that. And sometimes people with feedback, it's tough.
Right.
And I would always at the end of that be like, well, I'm just glad that we all got to talk that out, and now we can be friends and we're okay. I would always say something like that.
Yeah, right,
Just
right,
trying to
right.
be a peacemaker. But then sometimes it needed to be okay to sit in that unresolved tension, right? That we can't always bow tie that, and life doesn't always work out that way.
Mm,
And so I try to assume, okay, this person is trying the best they can with the resources they got. And even if they're not trying the best that they can, they may have been hurt or wounded or injured, traumatized in some way where they just don't have the capacity to expand beyond their current container. And so I want to be gracious enough to model for them, or to show them in some way,
right.
almost as if I'm like holding a candle to the floor and they can see a little bit further ahead, like, hey, there's a different way we can do this.
Right.
And even if on the inside there's not change happening, like I can't hope to be like a therapist, do weeks of therapy in one encounter, but maybe by seeing, hey, there's a better way, that they may be curious to explore that. And so that's not always easy to do. I don't do that perfectly. And when I say grief literacy, that's not a perfect thing. It's not like math.
Right, right, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's a fluid,
But I
it seems fluid too, with your terms are
very
fluid and you're trying to figure,
absolutely.
and everybody's journey is different. And that's where
Yep.
what I'm hearing from you is to allow grace for all those moments, and to
Mhm.
allow that person that doesn't know how to grieve to have grace for them, and the person that needs to grieve longer, grace for them. And again, back to your title, again, I'm holding up the book right now, but as long as you need, as long as you need. And to hopefully recognize what you need to overcome this grace, or grief, I should say, in
Mhm.
what you're going through. Because you're right,
Yeah.
what I'm hearing from you is so grace driven, and I love that, because that self awareness to look inside of you. And interesting enough, June, I also. I came from a broken home. My parents stayed married until I was 19, and they
Mhm.
probably should have divorced sooner, because it was so chaotic, and there were moments
Mm.
that I was constantly trying to provide peace in the home, and peace. I felt that peacemaker role
Yeah.
heavy, and as I got older, I found myself like I don't sit. My wife kind of identified it through years of counseling. Identified that anger is not a safe space for me. When I get
Mhm.
angry, it's not safe for me,
Yeah.
because that wasn't a safe, I find myself, if I do get angry, I'm apologizing. 10 minutes later, I'm devastated that I was so angry that I allowed
Yeah.
myself to get there. And how do I have a healthy, because anger is an emotion that we need to have. How do I do that in a healthy way? Because it wasn't modeled for me. And so you have to recognize these things in your life so that you can adjust and go forward. Talking about moving on, you say grief doesn't have an expiration date, that it changes shape but never disappears. How do you personally carry the weight of stories you've witnessed and still find light in the world? Because JS, you talk about this. You say how there's all you saw in the hospital from time to time was Fridays. That's all you saw was Fridays, which in the faith world, in the Jesus world, we understand Fridays meaning death, and
Mhm.
they weren't Sundays meaning resurrection.
Yeah.
And that's all you saw time after time after time. How do you carry on in that?
Yeah. So I do mention, and I have talked about, I've lost my faith even more than once,
Sure.
and I've come back around, and each time different. I would say my container or the box that I put God in has changed every time. You
Sure.
know,
Sure. I get
hopefully
it.
one day no box at all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
yeah. And I wish I could tell you, JB, that I've come to a place where I've balanced my hope with the tragedy that I see.
Hmm.
Um, but there are times still in the hospital where I'll see, resuscitation happening, or I'll see a patient decompensating quickly, or, just a bad situation.
Right.
Trauma comes in, and I just know from the start, this person's probably not going to leave the
Mm.
hospital alive.
Mm.
Where I am very angry, God, the universe, however you want to call it, and I may even pray like, God, are you kidding?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Are you serious about
Right.
this, you know?
Right. Right.
And yeah, because it's the things that you see, and the things that I've seen. At some point, I start to wonder, like, is there really a plan? Because it seems so haphazard and
Right.
chaotic and random, and just. And if I knew any better, it almost seems like it was orchestrated as if to cause suffering. And
Mm.
so there are a lot of questions and doubts like that in my mind. Um, but the other thing I have seen, JB, and I don't mean this in any way for anybody who's listening as like a consolation or trying to talk past their grief or talk them out of it, but I have seen this with my own eyes, is when you see people grieving and in loss, you also see the enormity and magnitude of how people step in and give so much love and
Mm.
give so much grace and so
Mhm.
much companionship, camaraderie. They give all of themselves to the people who are in loss. And I've seen the way that people come together and how their love for each other holds each other up through that time. And, you know, in a room when I'm at a deathbed and I ask the family, what was your loved one like? As I'm about to do like a prayer of blessing or what they may call last rites or
Right.
something like that. As they start sharing, you just start seeing this room busting up and laughing because they're sharing about
Sure.
this person they
Right.
love, and
Right.
it brings a smile to their face.
Right.
And the way that they hold each other with their laughter, the
Right.
way that they're supporting and encouraging one another, sharing these stories. I've seen deep sorrow, and I've seen the greatest of love. And that's really what keeps me going, is that, humans are capable of causing so much suffering. Humans are capable of also carrying each other through that suffering. And what a amplitude I've witnessed of deepest suffering, but also deepest love.
Right. Right. That honestly, it's amazing when you point that out, because I can remember when my grandfather, who was, I think, 77 years old, and he was part of what they call the greatest generation. He went through World War II and was in the army. And I remember he had remarried. My grandmother passed away early, and he had remarried a lady who just, I don't know, in her grief, she could not figure out where my grandfather was. And he was in the hospital
Mm.
for the last time. And the doctors were trying to tell her he wasn't coming out of the hospital, and she just couldn't hear it. And so I got on the phone with his doctor, who just wasn't there, but he had seen, I guess, his lungs X-rays or the recent stuff, and was telling and told me straight up. He just said, "Who am I talking about?" I said, "Well, this is his grandson." And he said, "Look, I don't know how to tell you this, but I've tried to tell your step grandmother what's going on, but she's just in a stage where she can't hear me. I want you to understand there's nothing left that we can do." She keeps just saying, "What can we do?" There's just nothing. We've done
Yeah.
everything. And his lungs are failing, and he's at a point where he can't receive enough oxygen. He said, "It's now time for you to call in the family and figure this all out." And my mother was at work, and I got her down and all that. But I remember I had to go in and walk in and tell my grandfather. because he didn't know. He looked at me and he would say, "Hey, Bubby." He would say, "Hey, Bubby, what did the doctor say?" That's what he would say. He was still talking at this point, and his oxygen was still there, and his mind was still there. And I just started tearing up. I couldn't get the words out. I remember, being in my early 30s, and I just was tears streaming down my face as I held his hand, and he looked at me with this notice on his face, and he said, "I know." He said, "I know." And I just held his hand. And that afternoon, he told me stories that I'd never heard before. He told me moments in his life and excitements and things that I never heard before. And then he slipped out. And we just had this wonderful, though, laughter that we had. And then eventually he slipped out, and there was this peace, and we sang worship songs, and we read scripture, and we had these joyous, compassionate moments for each other. They were beautiful moments, and it was one of those times where was grace filled. But I've seen people that were taken in seconds, from someone, and they never could tell them how they felt. And so there's sometimes, you don't know where that grief lies. And so it is amazing what you said. You don't know where it is. It's tough. Again, I go back to the title of the book, As Long as You Need, because I think when you lose somebody significant, I read somewhere it can take 7 years to really feel normal again. How do you see it in your world? If you lose like a mother or a father or something like that, when does normal ever come back, or is it just a new normal?
Yeah. I hesitate to ever put a timeline on it.
Sure.
7 years may be a general statistic.
Right.
It's so dependent and case by case. And then I even, if I were to even scale it back even more, I would even question, like, what does normal mean? Or what does it look like to recover or to be at the other end, Like when I first got to the hospital, we used to give like this literature to patients whose families who the patient just died. And, there was a little booklet that had a picture of like, here's flowers on one side, and then you go through this valley of grief. And then on the other side, you get back on the mountaintop. And I hated this picture. And I told my department, I said, I hate handing out this literature.
Right.
It just gives such a pretty picture of grief.
Right.
As if it follows this linear path, and it follows some sort of, here are the chronological, like little, pit stops that you take. And then finally, hey, you're grief free. And then let's cue the montage in the movie where, they take a shower, go back to the gym and eat a casserole or something,
Right.
Yeah. I think for everybody, it's going to be, of course, different. And that's the thing about grief is it is universal in its pain. But it is so specific because the people you lose and the things you lose are so shaped into your own heart and your brain and in your own life. And when you lose that person or you lose those things or that dream, it tears away at all the fixtures in which they fit you. And so it's so specific in that way. And I don't know if we ever actually get over grief or come out the other side so much as we carry it with us, and it changes shape and it changes the way that it looks. And so, there's a story I read in Mary Frances O'Connor's book, The Grieving Brain. She talks about this widow who, when her husband died, she was not at bedside at the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And she got what's called complicated grief. She felt guilty. She thought that because she wasn't there, I think she had some kind of narrative in her mind that, maybe she had killed him. And she felt guilty about it. And so she cooked 2 meals every night. And she would eat one, she would throw the other one away. And that was kind of her working her guilt out. So she got what's a very new therapy called CGT, I think, complicated grief therapy.
Wow.
And, old school therapy might tell her something like, hey, you need to get over this, stop cooking the 2 meals. But this therapist, who was well-versed in grief, said, have you thought about taking this second meal and maybe serving it to people who are not able to eat dinner as easily? And so slowly she started cooking more and more second meals for underserved communities and people who couldn't leave their homes. And her grief didn't necessarily leave her, but it changed shape. And she was
Interesting.
able to work out her grief in a way that served people and served those who were experiencing their own kind of grief. And so the rituals in which we partake, in which we commemorate those we lost, the activities that we do, the ways in which we remember, all those things change over time. And so, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the ways that we remember those grief rituals that we have, they're going to look different. But we still continue to carry that loss with us always. And we'll need different things for different seasons. And then there are going to be times, like I lost my friend John 6 years ago, and 6 years is not a very long time, but
Right.
it's 6 years.
Yeah.
And, sometimes every once in a while still, it'll feel like it just happened this morning, you know?
Yep.
And there are times that it hits you all at once. And I'm sure for you, you feel that, and your wife may
Yes.
feel that as well.
Yes.
There are those moments, a smell or a sight or a song will bring it all back, just rushing back,
You're
right?
right.
But the ways in which we carry that will change, will be different. The weight of it, the feel of it, and so and we find new ways to deal with it. We find ways to carry it differently in every season of life.
I want to switch gears a little bit from grief because I
Yeah.
know people are going to hear this interview and they're going to want to go and find your book. They should. Again, you've got another one coming out. You just finished. I know you and I
Yep.
have been trying to plan this, and so you've got another one. Can you tell us the title of this book, or is it still a working title? Do you know?
Yeah,
Do you know
I
what's coming
think the
out?
title is still supposed to be a secret.
Okay,
If
keep it a
I'm if
secret.
I'm not,
Keep it a secret because
but
this
I
is
can tell
coming
you
out.
what it's about, though.
Yes, tell me what it's about because I'm super excited about your next. By the way, again, this book, As Long as You Need by J.S. Park, you've got to check it out. You can find it at Amazon. It's so good, and you are an incredible writer. I absolutely loved your book, so I can't wait to hear your next one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah. I can tell you what it's about. It's about family systems, family dynamics, intergenerational trauma, and
Yes,
dismantling a lot of those internalized narratives that we get, especially from our family of origin.
sure.
And
Sure.
even earlier when I was talking about how when I enter a room, when I see a patient, I'm not just seeing them alone. I'm seeing their entire community, all the voices that they're
That's
carrying.
right. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when I first learned we spent a whole unit learning about family systems. And as a chaplain, I thought, why would we learn this as a chaplain? And then I realized when I'm entering rooms, I'm seeing one person, but I'm really seeing like 100.
Yeah,
And if you go even
right,
if you go 10 generations back, the math works out that it's over 1,000 people.
right,
And
right. Yeah, there was a
and we
famous
care.
movie that Bruce Willis was in that I cannot think of the name of the movie right now. Danielle, can you remember it? And he gets divorced from his wife, or they have this crazy thing, but it's them in bed with like all of their parents. What's it? The Story of Us. So if you haven't seen The
Okay,
Story of
okay.
Us, and he's in bed with his wife, but then she's in bed with her parents, and he's in bed with his parents, and it goes on and
Yep.
on, where they have all of these voices inside their
Yep.
relationship. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
When you marry a spouse, you marry a family.
yeah.
And and when you have a child, that child has parents, but they also have, hundreds, if not thousands of ancestors.
Right.
And and we drew a genogram in our family systems unit. And a genogram doesn't just show a family tree, it also shows things like addiction, abuse, cutoffs, divorce,
Yeah.
loss, all kinds of things. And if you look at the genogram, if you go, and usually it goes about 4 or 5 generations back, but you'll see patterns from ancestors you never even met before,
Wow. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you'll see these loops just happen, and it's surprising and at the same time not surprising. And so the book covers a lot of that, about how we wrestle with that, and it kind of goes in concentric circles where I start with our family inside the home, and then I talk about when you lose someone, how do you keep connection with family who's gone. And then I go even further than that about whether it's immigrants or people who have ancestors or who have, are apart from their own family. How do we keep connection with them? How do we reconnect with our heritage? So that's kind of like a global human family. So it's just 6 chapters. And, I found this book harder to write than my book on grief.
Really. Because you're
a
digging
lot
deep
harder.
introspectively too, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much
Yeah.
my own intergenerational stuff, and it
Sure.
was really, really hard, and lots of therapy later. Yeah, I just turned in the book this week.
No, that's amazing. I tell my kids, and I've said this on the show before, but I tell my kids that I've got all their, and I've paid for all of the older ones for sure, their first counseling sessions, because I'm like, look, I did the best we could. Your mom and I did the best we could. We didn't have all the answers, but not only am I going to pay for your first counseling sessions, but I'll also show up and apologize where I need to, because
Yep.
you just sometimes are doing the best you can, which brings me to a question. I just have a few more questions. I know we're running short on time here, but look, people are going to search you. They're going to find you. They're going to see the Amazon. They especially my audience here, and I have people from all different walks of faith that come into my audience.
Yeah.
We call it "What the Hell Do I Know?" in part because I hope that we're not really a faith-based podcast. However, if you are of faith, I hope that watching this podcast will stretch your definition of faith. And if you're not a believer, I hope that you'll start doubting your unbelief. That's why I did this podcast. And but our faith has a lot of people, and we kind of interjected a little bit of that earlier in saying that the loudest voices sometimes can be the worst voices. And you've put some stuff out online. It's also something that I feel very closely associated with you in heart by. Because one of your posts, you said, if your theology doesn't work for the suffering, it doesn't work at all. I mean, does your faith work when life falls apart? How does that work? I mean, if your theology doesn't work for suffering, it doesn't work at all. I mean, what does that mean when you say that?
Yeah, I think I mean that on several levels. I think for one, sometimes we're taught a faith, and I don't blame anyone for this.
Sure.
I just think it's maybe a lack of experience or lack of skill, or maybe having been sheltered, or maybe preachers were saying things for profit that sounded nice,
Right.
but didn't work in practice.
Correct. I agree.
But yeah, sometimes we're given inherit a type of religion that is sweet on the surface, but on the inside is not going to hold us through devastation, will not hold us through people-shaped loss in our lives. And those little cliche things like, God's using this to refine you in the fire,
Right.
or or even pop culture stuff like, don't ask for a lighter load, get a stronger spine,
Yeah.
things like that, man up, it'll be okay, don't cry, be strong. All those kind of things that we say, they may sound pretty. Some of those things may sound poetic, but they're not going to hold us through real suffering. Suffering, the only way through it is through it. And
That's strong.
the
That's
theology, and that's real tough. But the theology that's going to hold us through very often is the person next to you being present, their presence. So, I've written something like it. Maybe this sounds too pretty or something as well, but I've written something like, often the best theology you can offer someone is yourself. Because, when someone is suffering, what they don't need is the lecture or the lesson or the epiphany or the moralizing or, the spiritualizing.
You're totally
What
right.
they really need, is for you to enter into the pain and the anguish, and to not be uncomfortable with it, but to sit with them in that screaming or that shutdown, that fog, that hurt. And that's true with mental health. That's true with trauma. That's true with grief. And so much of the theology almost feels like, let me throw you something, a one-liner, and good luck. From a distance. Yeah.
Joon, I say
And
this
so-
all the time that you can listen. I love all you folks listening out there. If you got the T-shirt, I love that you got the T-shirt. Wear all the T-shirts you want. It's all great, but you can wear the T-shirt or you can be the example. I hope you do both, but if you're not going to do one of them, pick the example. Because we so often want to wear the T-shirt and think that that's going to get us through. And it's so much more. What does it look like? One thing I constantly am trying to ask myself, especially in today's environment, is not what it's like to be an American and what does love require of me, but as a Christian, as a
Right.
person of Jesus, as somebody that says, what is the least of these? What does love require of me in that? You know, because
Yeah.
everything else doesn't matter anymore. What does love require me in this moment, right now, right today, and what I'm going through? And that's a big question. Well, listen, I have thoroughly enjoyed this moment with you in time. JS, June, I know you're going by both. And I know June is your given name, right? And JS is
That's
really
right.
kind of your writer name that you
I
have.
guess my pen name.
Your
Yeah.
pen name,
Yeah.
JS Park. So you've got to check him out, JS Park. Again, the book he has out right now is As Long as You Need. The new one will be coming out. When can we expect the new one to come out, by the way?
That'll be November of next year.
November. Oh, so we've got some time. So look, you've got
Yes,
time
sir.
to read the first one. But June, I want to ask. I have one last question. You're going to kind of finish off. You're at the end of my season. This second season here. I'm so thankful to have you. This podcast has grown from a few listeners that I thought nobody listened to, and we've got 25,000 subscribers now. Over 25,000. I'm super
Amazing.
thankful for all of you guys, all you jabronis that listen to this old $10 podcast. But we appreciate it, and it means the world. So like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And shout out to my sponsors at floors.com for everything that they do, and my guys at True North Pest Control. But last question I have for you, I've been asking everybody this season. If you could go back in time and tell your 25-year-old self anything, what would you tell him?
Besides knock it off.
That's so good. So good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking of that. What's that one? The Michael Jordan. He's like, stop it.
Stop
Get
it.
some help.
Yeah, that's right. It's so good.
Yeah. You know, I may tell 25-year-old self. Now, how much time do is this like I got one
You're
got one
good.
shot to say something,
You're good.
right?
You're good. This is you. This is all on you, baby.
Yeah. You know, I can say this about my 25-year-old self. My 25-year-old self was struggling so bad with trying to please everyone, with depression, with anxiety. I just remember being afraid all the time. You know, afraid
Yeah.
that I wasn't doing a good job, afraid that people could really see me, that I was just pretending or something, that I wasn't. I had some kind of sickness or something in me that if they really saw me, that they would run. You know, I just had these kind of really false bad narratives in my head about my own worth and my own value. And I'd probably give my 25-year-old self a hug and just let them know, you know, hey, you're good and you're better than you think, you know, and the stuff you believe about yourself, those are all lies, you know. And I believe in accountability, you know, I believe in improving ourselves and getting help and getting better. And at the same time, just telling them, like, I love you, you know, you're loved. And just letting them know that. I'd probably give myself a hug first, because that 25-year-old self badly needed one. He really, really just needed the comfort of knowing, like, you know, people aren't afraid to get close to you, that you are worthy of that love. I just remember being scared and afraid all the time. And I felt like I was running for my life all the time. And at the time, I was like doing youth pastor type stuff.
Yeah.
And I just remember I would have panic attacks all the time. You know, I just thought, I got to speak to these kids. What am I even going to tell them?
Right.
And, you know, to this day, a lot of those youth students still reach out to me years and years later, you know, saying you were so pivotal in my life. And I'm like, man, I'm sure I said so much dumb stuff. I'm glad you got something good out of it.
Isn't that how God works, right?
Yeah, right. And I'm just so glad and moved that they would reach out to me. I mean, I've teared up every time that they've done that they'll message me or just say, you know, you were so formative in my life.
So awesome.
And I wish 25-year-old me would have known that, hey, you're doing okay. You're trying your best. You know, you're really pouring out. You love these youth students. You're really doing a great job. And I did that for about 7 years, you know, before I got into chaplaincy. But yeah, I think just a big hug and just saying, hey, look, you're good. You are better than you think. I would have done that for my 25-year-old self, 15-year-old self, 5-year-old self. Just a big hug. Hey, you're doing okay.
Man, JS, that's so good. The wedding I'm officiating, by the way, coming
Yeah.
in the next day or so, is for a young man who I met when he was 15, and I was a camp counselor for these kids. And I was kind of this outside pastor that always pastored in downtown Atlanta in a very diverse community. These guys were all the black kids, and here I am, this white guy, and they'd say, this outsider, and they'd say, hey, you're going to be the guy chaperoning these kids. And so I chaperoned these black kids, and man, I love these boys. They're so great. And that week, I just decided I'm going to pour into them. And when chaperones would go their separate ways, I wouldn't. So if they wanted to ride the bungee jump, or they wanted to do the slingshot, or get in the water, or get in the pool, or play volleyball, I just dove all into them. And I said, I'm going to do life because I want to see what they're about, and I want to experience life with them. And they changed my life. And so this day I'm still mentoring him. And so this young man I'm going to marry on Tuesday, and I've actually married another friend of his that I also mentored. And I've just been able to keep up with them through BLM days. I've been able to keep up through them through a lot of questions that they had and discovery that they needed and not understanding. So quite frankly, I learned more about my really privilege that I've grown up with than they probably helped me. They helped me more than I've helped them, for sure. And so here I get a chance to honor that and marry them. And but I love what you said about giving a hug to yourself, because I've often thought that, like, you wonder what you can do. And the audience that watches this show, God bless you again, it's 18 to 44, but we have a lot of young people that watch this show that are in that world. And that's my heart, is this next generation. And how do you see yourself, and how can you be better? A wise man learns from others' mistakes. A foolish man learns from their own, right? So how can you learn to grow forward? And sometimes I think if you are 25, you just need to stop and think, I'm doing the best I can. I need to just give myself a hug. I'm doing the best I can. I'm checking off the lists. I'm trying really hard. It's going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hydrant so often. There's three stages of life. You're either in a problem, coming out of a problem, or going into a problem, right? And so
there it is.
So you need to just love yourself where you can. But again, I have loved every moment of this, JS. This is the part that I like to call listen up, kids. So listen up, kids. We could have talked for hours, myself and Joon, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. The way JS sees people and the way he gives permission to just be human, it's something we need more of. In this episode, if this episode hit home for you, go grab his book as long as you need. It's honest, compassionate, and it'll meet you right where you are. Big thanks again to True North Pest Control and at floors.com for supporting the show. You can find all our past episodes, merch, and stories at thejabronis.com. And as always, follow along on Instagram at _Jason_Becker for behind the scenes and upcoming guests. I appreciate you listening, sharing, and being part of this community. And until next time, take care of each other. And remember, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is just sit with the pain and breathe. Or don't. I mean, what the hell do I know?
What the hell do I know? I'm just JB, middle-aged dad with ADD. Candid combos, jokes so lame, jabronis pulling a poker face. Just a couple of dudes with ADD.